Stepdaughter laughed in my face when I asked to walk her down the aisle. Real dad is doing that. You just pay for the open bar. I walked to the venue, pulled the deposit, and spent the $30,000 on a solo fishing trip. Hello everyone, welcome to Reddit Visuals. I used to believe that if you showed up long enough, paid your dues, and loved someone like your own, eventually that would count for something. I was wrong. Some people don't just forget what you've done for them. They rewrite it. And that lesson cost me $30,000, a wedding invitation, and whatever illusion I still had about being part of a family. I'm 46 years old. I work in commercial HVAC sales. Nothing glamorous, but I've made a decent living. I'm the kind of guy who fixes things instead of replacing them, keeps his promises, and believes that being consistent matters more than being flashy. I was married once before, no kids of my own. That marriage ended quietly after 3 years, no drama, just two people who wanted different lives. A few years later, I met Karen at a hospital charity event where I was donating equipment. Karen was 37 when we met, a nurse with a sharp sense of humor, kind eyes, and a 12-year-old daughter named Lily. Her biological father, Mark, had been mostly absent since she was 4. Not dead, not in prison, just gone. He lived 2 states away, sent birthday cards maybe half the time, showed up for a weekend every year or two, made promises about being more involved, then disappeared again, like smoke. Karen had raised Lily essentially alone, working double shifts and running on fumes. I didn't come in trying to replace anyone. I knew better than that. I was just the guy who showed up. I picked Lily up from school when Karen worked late. I sat through middle school band concerts that could break glass. I helped with algebra homework I barely remembered from 30 years ago. When she wanted to join travel soccer, but Karen couldn't afford it, I covered the fees without making a thing. When her car broke down in her senior year, I co-signed the loan because her credit was non-existent. When she got into a good private college she desperately wanted but couldn't afford, even with scholarships, I quietly covered the $22,000 gap. Not once did I throw it in her face. I figured love was something you demonstrated, not announced. Karen and I got married when Lily was 15. It was a small ceremony, nothing fancy, but Lily was there. She was my stepdaughter legally and in every way that mattered to me. For the most part, things were okay. Lily wasn't warm, but she wasn't cruel either. She'd say thanks when I did things for her. She'd show up for family dinners. I chalked up the emotional distance to teenage years and the complicated fact that I wasn't her biological father. But I was her dad in every functional way. I was there, always. When Lily got engaged at 26, I was genuinely happy for her. Her fiancé, Josh, seemed like a decent guy. Quiet, worked in IT, didn't cause waves. Karen cried when Lily called with the news. I hugged them both and meant it when I said congratulations. I thought maybe this would be one of those moments where things shifted, where our relationship finally matured into something warmer. A few weeks after the engagement, Lily asked if we could meet for coffee to talk about the wedding. Just the two of us. I took it as a good sign. Maybe this was the breakthrough I'd been hoping for. We met at a cafe near the river on a Saturday morning. She ordered a complicated oat milk latte, barely touched it, and got straight to business. Venue costs were astronomical. Catering was outrageous. She'd gotten quotes for everything. Then she said the open bar package alone was $32,000. She said it casually, like she was talking about buying groceries. Then she looked at me and said, "Mom mentioned you might be willing to help with some of the bigger expenses. The bar would be huge." I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. Not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to. Weddings are milestones. I thought this was my milestone too, in some small way. I thought after 14 years of showing up, maybe I'd earned a place in this moment. That's when I asked. I didn't rehearse it. It just came out naturally. I said, "I know your dad's coming to the wedding, and I respect that. But I was wondering if you'd want me to walk you down the aisle. Maybe we could both do it, or if you're not comfortable with that, I'd be honored to do it instead." She laughed. Not a nervous giggle. Not an uncomfortable chuckle. She threw her head back and laughed in my face as I'd just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. Then she leaned back in her chair, caught her breath, and said, "No. My real dad is doing that. Obviously." She paused, tilted her head like she was explaining something to a child, and added, "You're helping with the open bar. That's what we need from you." I remember the hiss of the espresso machine behind the counter. I remember the couple at the next table glancing over. I remember the way my hands went numb around my coffee mug. I kept waiting for her to realize what she'd just said, to backtrack, to soften it. She didn't. She just pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her wedding Pinterest board, as if nothing had happened. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Let me think about it," and left 20 minutes later. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Karen, staring at the ceiling, replaying every soccer game, every tuition check, every time I'd rearranged my life to be there. And I realized something that made my chest hurt. I had been useful. I had never been family. I didn't confront Karen right away. I needed to be sure I wasn't overreacting. Maybe Lily had just worded it badly. Maybe I was being too sensitive. So a few days later, I asked Karen if we could talk. I told her exactly what Lily said, word for word, including the laugh. Karen sighed, not in surprise, in annoyance. She said, "You're taking this too personally. She's stressed about the wedding. She didn't mean it the way it sounded." I asked her how else I was supposed to take it. Karen said, "Mark is her father. You knew that going in. This is about tradition. Don't make it into something bigger than it is." I asked if she thought it was fair for me to be treated like a checkbook instead of family. She said, "Well, you did offer to help, and we do need the money. The wedding's expensive." That was the moment. Not anger, just this cold, clear understanding that I'd been cast in a role I never auditioned for, and they were annoyed I was trying to rewrite the script. I called my brother that night. He's a family therapist, ironically. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You already know what this is. You're looking for permission to admit it." He was right. Over the next week, I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring. The wedding planning emails I wasn't copied on. The seating chart Lily showed Karen, where I was at table 9 with Karen's co-workers I'd met twice, while Mark was at table 2 with immediate family. The father-daughter dance song list that had been finalized, all songs Mark apparently loved, songs I'd never heard Lily play once in 14 years. The rehearsal dinner speech lineup included Mark, both sets of grandparents, the maid of honor, and the best man. Not me. I wasn't part of this wedding. I was funding it. So I did what I do when something breaks. I assessed the damage and made a plan. I called the venue directly. I confirmed I was listed as the primary payer on the contract and asked about the deposit terms. The woman on the phone said it was fully refundable up to 30 days before the event, with a 10% processing fee. We were 42 days out. I didn't tell Karen. I didn't tell Lily. The next morning, I took a personal day. I drove to the venue in person. It was one of those restored barn places that charge a fortune to pretend you're having a rustic wedding. I met with the event coordinator, signed the withdrawal paperwork, and watched her process the refund. $28,800 went back into my account within 5 business days. On the drive home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a decision just for me. I stopped at a travel outfitter near the marina and talked to a guy about guided fishing trips. He had a cancellation for a 10-day solo trip to a remote lodge in northern British Columbia. Salmon run season. No cell service, no Wi-Fi. Just water, wilderness, and silence. I booked it on the spot. Another $11,000. The fishing trip cost almost as much as the wedding deposit I'd just pulled, and I didn't feel guilty for 1 second. I still didn't tell them. The fallout started 4 days later. Karen came home from work around 7, and I could hear it before I saw her. She slammed the door, threw her purse on the counter, and walked into the living room where I was watching a game. She stood in front of the TV and said, "The venue is called Lily. They said the deposit was withdrawn. What the hell did you do?" I muted the TV. I looked at her calmly and said, "I pulled the deposit. It was in my name." Her face went white, then red. "You what?" I said, "I removed my financial support from a wedding where I'm not considered family." She started yelling, told me I was sabotaging Lily's big day, that I was being vindictive, that I was punishing a 26-year-old girl for one comment she made under stress, that I was ruining everything because my feelings got hurt. I let her finish. Then I asked one question. Was I her stepfather or was I a sponsor? She stared at me. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She said, "That's not fair." I said, "You're right. It's not." She stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. Lily called an hour later. I could hear her screaming through the phone from across the room. Karen answered, and I listened to her try to calm Lily down, failing miserably. When Karen finally hung up, she looked at me like I was a stranger. She said, "She's devastated. She's crying. Do you even care?" I said, "I cared for 14 years. She laughed in my face. Karen said, "So you're just throwing away our family over this?" I said, "I'm not throwing it away. I'm just finally seeing it clearly." The next day, Lily called me directly. I almost didn't answer, but I figured I owed her a conversation. Her voice was shaking, angry, and tearful all at once. She said, "How could you do this to me? You embarrassed me. The venue is panicking. Vendors are asking questions. Everyone's going to know." I said very calmly, "You made it clear where I stand, Lily. I believed you." She said, "That's not what I meant." I said, "Then what did you mean?" Silence. Then she said, her voice hardening, "You're punishing me because I chose my real dad. That's what this is about." I said, "No, I'm protecting myself from being used." She said something I couldn't quite make out, then hung up. That should have been the end. It wasn't. The venue cancellation created chaos. Lily had booked everything through the venue's preferred vendor program. Once the venue contract was void, several vendors sent notifications that their contracts were contingent on the venue booking. The bar package, the tables and chairs, even the string quartet. Vendors started pulling out or demanding new deposits. The wedding planner called Karen in a panic. Guests started getting confusing messages. Family members started asking questions, and people started taking sides. Karen's sister, whom I'd always gotten along with, called me privately. She said, "I don't know the whole story, but from what I'm hearing, I don't blame you. That was cruel." One of Lily's bridesmaids, a girl named Amber whom I'd driven to the airport a dozen times over the years, sent me a text. "I heard what she said to you. I'm sorry. That wasn't okay." Even Josh, the fiancé, reached out awkwardly through email. He said he didn't know all the details, but asked if there was any way to find a resolution that works for everyone. I appreciated the gesture, but I told him the truth. I wasn't angry. I was just done. Then came the second wave, and this is the part that almost made me cave. Mark, the real dad, the man who'd been absent for 22 years, apparently had nothing. No savings, no intention of contributing financially. Lily had been banking on him showing up, walking her down the aisle, and playing father of the bride. But when she tried to talk to him about helping cover the collapsed vendor contracts, he told her he'd just lost his job and couldn't help. I found this out because Karen told me, in tears, sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m, 3 weeks before the wedding. She said, "Mark bailed. He's not paying for anything. Lily's devastated. She doesn't know what to do." I waited. Karen looked at me, her eyes red, and said, "Is there any way you'd reconsider? Not the whole deposit, just enough to save the wedding. Please." And for a second, I almost did it. Because I'm a fixer. Because I hate seeing people I love in pain. Because 14 years of muscle memory told me to step in and make it okay. But then I remembered the laugh. I remembered real dad. I remembered table 9. I said no. Karen's face crumpled. "Why are you being so cruel?" I said, "I'm not being cruel. I'm being consistent. You both made it clear I'm not her father, so I'm not acting like one." She didn't talk to me for 3 days after that. During those 3 days, Lily sent me an email. Not a call. An email. It was long, carefully worded, and almost convincing. She said she'd spoken harshly and didn't mean to minimize my role in her life. She said she was under a lot of stress and made a mistake. She said she valued everything I'd done for her and hoped we could move forward. She ended it with, "I'm hoping we can discuss the wedding expenses again. I know things got complicated, but I think we can work something out." I read it 3 times. I showed it to my brother. He said, "She didn't apologize," she explained. "There's a difference." He was right. There was no, "I'm sorry." There was no acknowledgement that what she said was wrong. Just damage control. I didn't reply. The week before the wedding, Lily posted something on Facebook. One of those vague, passive-aggressive statuses. It's amazing how people show their true colors when it matters most. Money really does change people. Grateful for the ones who stayed real. The comments were a mix. Some of her friends rallied around her. Other people who knew me asked pointed questions. One of Karen's coworkers commented, "There are always two sides," and Lily deleted it. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. By that point, I was already packing for British Columbia. I left 2 days before the wedding. Karen knew. She didn't try to stop me. She just looked at me with this exhausted sadness and said, "I don't know how we come back from this." I said, "I don't either." The fishing trip was everything I didn't know I needed. No phone, no guilt, no expectations. Just early mornings on the water, the weight of a rod in my hands, and the kind of silence that lets you actually think. Somewhere around day 5, I stopped feeling angry. I just felt free. I caught a 30-pound king salmon on day 7. The guide took a picture. I didn't post it anywhere. It was just for me. When I got back, the wedding had already happened. Karen filled me in, voice flat, like she was reading a grocery list. They'd downsized, moved it to a friend's backyard, cash bar, no band, just a playlist. About 60 people instead of the planned 150. Mark walked her down the aisle and left 2 hours into the reception because he had to get back. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt sad for everyone involved. Karen moved out 6 weeks later. Not dramatically, just boxes, quiet conversations, and the shared understanding that something fundamental had broken. She said she couldn't forgive me for abandoning Lily. I said I couldn't forgive her for letting me be treated like an ATM. We both meant it. We finalized the divorce 4 months later. Amicable, clean, no contested assets. We'd kept our finances mostly separate anyway. The last piece of this story came almost a year later. I ran into Josh, Lily's husband, at a hardware store. He looked uncomfortable but didn't avoid me. We made small talk. Then he said carefully, "I know things ended badly. For what it's worth, I think you got a raw deal." I appreciated that. I asked how married life was treating him. He hesitated, then said, "It's been rough. Financial stress. We're working through some stuff." I didn't push, but 2 months after that, I heard through mutual friends that they'd separated. The marriage lasted 14 months. Money problems, resentment, fights about family, the usual slow collapse. I don't celebrate that. I don't feel like I won anything. I feel settled. Because here's what I learned. You can't buy your way into being loved. You can't pay for respect. And you can't fix relationships where you're valued for what you provide instead of who you are. I didn't lose $30,000. I bought clarity. I bought my freedom. I bought the knowledge that sometimes walking away is the only thing that makes sense. I've started dating again, slowly. A woman I met through work, no kids, no complications. And I'm different now. I don't overfunction. I don't try to prove my worth by paying for things. I don't accept being treated like I'm lucky to be included. So here's my question for you. Was I wrong for pulling that deposit and walking away? Should I have swallowed my pride, funded the wedding, and kept the peace? Or was this the only move that made sense? Drop a comment. Tell me what you would have done if someone laughed in your face and told you your only value was your wallet. And if this story hit home, make sure you like the video and subscribe to Reddit Visuals. We've got more stories where people finally chose themselves, and trust me, you'll want to hear them. Thanks for watching.